Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. I've got with me today William Tincup. He comes from Dallas, Texas. Many of you might have heard of William in his prolific nature of experience. He's the president and editor at large of RecruitingDaily, which is at the intersection of HR and technology. He's a writer, speaker, advisor, consultant, and investor, together with a storyteller and a teacher. So this is going to be fun, William. Welcome.
Ross, happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So sitting on the board of, is it 24 or more HR tech companies around the world?
Yep.
And then I've got a bit of a top Trump style share out of some stats, some William Tincup stats.
All
and
right.
These are 250 HR articles, spoken at 375 HR recruiting conferences. So, more than one a day, every day for a year.
Yep.
So that's a fair few, and conducted over 1,650 HR podcasts and webinars. So we're in the presence of something quite special here, William. So I'm excited for this.
I appreciate that. A lot of it is just I've been blessed with opportunities like this where other people will have me on their show. And I love podcasting because I love talking to people. So the writing, I think early in my career, I like to write because I like to point at stuff and go, why do we do that? And so that was kind of a fun bit. I still write occasionally, but I've found that I just love talking to people and hearing their stories. And so I've been blessed in that way. And so thanks for having me. And thanks for going through those stats. So
thank you. Before we get into some of your story, I've got two questions for you, William. And it is, do you like lasagna? And what is Real G?
So it's actually a bit from a Lil Wayne song. And what he's talking about is Real G's, gangsters. Move in silence, real gangsters. Move in silence, like lasagna, the G in lasagna is silent. And so what's interesting about that lick is, and it's true of a lot of things in life. Like if you're smart, you don't tell people you're smart. If you're gifted, you don't tell people you're gifted. If you're rich, you don't tell people you're gifted or rich. If you're a real G, a real gangster, you don't tell people you're a real gangster. Like it's a tell. So even, you can find in all music, in all arts, forms of art, you can find some things that actually are true of life. That's what I love about the balance between art and life. Art imitates life, life if it imitates art. Lil Wayne's lick, is a simple lick. When you look at it on its surface, real G's move in silence like lasagna. But what it's really, to me, what it was compelling to me about it is it gets to the heart of kind of pretenders versus folks that aren't pretenders. And no hate for anybody. It's you have to do what you have to do. But I'm always amazed at people when they start off a conversation and they want to tell you about how smart they are or how rich they are or how whatever they are. And then I think to myself, that lick to myself. I'm like, you don't need to tell me any of those things. I think I'll discover them or I won't in conversation.
I guess it's part of just the inner confidence, the inner peace to not have to be judged other than our self-judgment. And, that is a lovely sentiment and a lovely piece that even in our first sort of 20 minutes hanging out before we started the record button, I just got that sense from you. And I want to touch on, because you mentioned about art, and you did art history, right? And that was one of the first areas. For those who are listening and can't see, William is surrounded by some amazing art behind him. If you're watching it on the video version, you'll see. But tell us a little bit. What
are all paintings I did in my 20s.
Yeah. Really? Tell me a bit more about art history and where that started for you, William.
So best career advice ever. I'm at the University of Alabama, and I'm registering for school, meet with a career guidance counselor. And she's probably a 6-year-old African-American woman. And she said, William, what are you good at? And then she goes, before you answer, 1 in 4, 25%, this is 1991, 25% of our graduates end up working in their major. So just kind of let that settle in. 25%. If you get a chemistry degree, you have a 1 in 4 chance of actually working something with chemistry. And so I let it kind of set in. And she goes, what are you good at? I said, well, I've been painting since I was 9. She goes, great, go do art. Go do art history, or something around that, and it'll be easy for you. And then you'll figure it out afterwards. You'll figure out what you need to do afterwards. Best career advice ever, because I literally loved my college experience. I didn't dread any of the classes or the assignments or teachers or any of the work, because I was having fun. Like, I was just doing art and creating things. And so it was a fun bit. And of course, society would then have you like, what are you going to do with that, this, that, and the other? I'm like, I'm going to memorize over 15,000 works of art, basically the history of the world through the lens of art. I talk more when I talk to people today in business, and I have an MBA on the other end of that, but I talk more about art than I do about business. So what are you going to do with that? Well, you'll find a way to make it work in your life, because it'll be fun. It won't be a beating.
And often, I think, was it Steve Jobs, you connect the dots backwards, not forwards. And
that's absolutely great advice. Career advice, ironically, is the career never makes sense in the windshield, but it always makes sense in the rearview mirror. Mm-hmm. So once you go back and you look at your career, and as you look at your career, every little step at the time probably didn't make sense. But when you go back and look at them, you're like, absolutely makes sense. Totally makes sense now. So yeah, those are great bit by Jobs.
So that balance then of leaning into something that is blurry, undefined, and maybe unknown with a playful attitude and a sort of serendipitous happenstance, something will show up, to a absolute no. When I'm 18, I write my goal down like Schwarzenegger to say, I'm going to be the president, or I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. And then I, follow the secret where the universe shows me all the things in. Where do you follow, or do you actually see those as the 2 palm trees in a hammock that you need both in order for it to not be on the floor?
I think at different points you need, so getting to some of the things that you're just great at in terms of flexibility and adaptability, I think at different points, different people need different things. So the truism or the absolutism of saying it's this way, I kind of look at that as a false construct. For some people need, at a point in their life, they need to write down their goals. And that's just what they need. They need a list, they need a thing, they need to tack it to the wall, they need something to kind of make the chaos structured. Some people don't need that, or don't need that at a particular point in their life. At 53, I can tell you I'm completely comfortable with chaos and ambiguity, because I'm comfortable with myself. Whereas I couldn't have always said that. I wouldn't have said that about myself at different stages in my life. But at this stage, I can walk into anything and just be comfortable, because I'm just going to be me. Like, I'm not going to try. In fact, the times in which I've failed in life is always when I've tried to be someone else. And so I've finally figured that out. It took me a while, but I finally figured that out. It's like, no, I'm just going to be me.
So in that chaos, in that ambiguity, there is always abundance wherever you are. But in that abundance, do you filter? And if so, how do you filter?
My
opportunity, or where you show up, what you do. So in all of those things, do you filter, and how do you filter?
Well, so the filtering is a couple levels. One is I filter based on like the opportunity. I look at the opportunity as, is this something that will help me grow? Is it something I've done 10 times? Probably not as interested. Is it something that's interesting? like compelling. Like I want to push myself. So when I perform on stage for an audience, it's art. Like I don't like, I look at PowerPoint and I just kind of mock it a lot and just go, PowerPoint makes you stupid. So get up and tell stories and get up in front of the audience and do a bit, like have fun and make yourself vulnerable. And so I like that. Now that's not for everyone. And so I recognize that the world is not one dimensional in the sense. So I look for opportunities where I haven't done a bit. Like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. I've never done that bit. All right, let's see what that does. Let's see how that goes. I like that. I like pushing myself into kind of experimental types of things. I also look at kind of the treatment of people, like if whoever I'm working with, if they're flexible, and if people come to me with something that's really boxed in and there's no way to grow it, I tend to not like that. I tend to kind of react negatively to that. And so I look at the opportunity, I look at the way the people treat me, and I look at my ability to be myself, because I have to protect against. In fact, I was doing a bit. It was in Arkansas. Ironically, it was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I'd been scheduled to do this bit, the keynote. And right before I go on stage, one of the conference organizers says, "William, I know you're a little edgy, this, that, and the other, and that you use some adult language, but this is a real conservative audience, and you should probably not do that." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, fascinating. I totally get it." And then I went out and I immediately cursed.
Yeah. So I'm told never to say X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
I'll get it out of the way.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get there. Hey, you know what? Sally told me not to curse. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go through a litany of curse words and just kind of get them out there. And now we're done with that. Now we'll get on to the bit.
Yeah.
I don't like being told that I can't do something.
Interesting.
And so that's also kind of stylistically, I don't like it when people box me in and say, "Don't be you. You hired me." Let me see if I get this straight. You hired me to be me, to then tell me not to be me. No, not
Sounds
going to
like
do
the
that.
essence of a bad relationship there, William.
Well, it's the
I
essence.
like you, but I want to change you.
Well, ironically, we definitely won't talk about women in this sense. However, my wife would tell you that 7 years into our marriage, she discovered that I also liked country music. And she goes, "I didn't know that you like country music." I said, "Honey, I grew up in Texas." Like, how do you not like country music? Like, yeah, I stopped listening to country music at George Strait, so I don't know a lot of the modern or contemporary country music, but I grew up in Texas. Of course I like country music. Like, duh. But it is kind of funny. And she and I have joked about this through the years, and is she saw kind of a very raw piece of clay, right? And she liked the rawness. And I'm still the same today.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed.
This seeker for new, for novelty, for growth, for learning, right. which is a dream for people around you when we know who someone is. Right. So when we know what someone's after, what they're looking for, we can build constructs in which they can provide value, they can feel that they're contributing, they can feel all of the essence of what it means to be human, that I want to belong, I want to learn, serve, and earn, in that mix.
It's interesting because you're such an expert in this space. It's creating space for vulnerability. And again, the world's big enough for all of us, right? So like, I'm Roman Catholic. So what? I have friends all over the spectrum, from atheist, agnostic, Methodist, pick a Buddhist, pick something, and I have friends everywhere. And again, when I talk to folks, let's say about organized religion, something that would be taboo to talk about, generally speaking, I just basically say, yeah, this is who I am, but so what? Like, the room, the space is big enough, the world is big enough for everyone. And so being vulnerable in the sense of saying, I don't know much about Hinduism. Tell me a little bit about that. Like I would like to learn. Like give me some, let me see if I understand some of this stuff. And I
It's
like that.
yeah.
I like
It's
people knowing where I'm coming from, wherever that is. And then them not judging me and I'm not judging them. And then having that space to go, yeah, I don't have all the answers.
but that
I'm not,
sense of
I'll never have all the answers.
no, the sense of almost transcendence to allow paradox to exist, rather
100%.
than a conversation has to bring alignment.
Right.
I believe this, you don't, so we have to believe one or other in order to move forward, rather than
Yeah.
can these two paradoxes exist and we're not going
100%.
to end up with, blood and fists. But
Can
we can,
they?
yeah.
They should exist.
Yes.
They should exist. If we do this right, you and I talked pre-show about football and rugby, and we talked about how different the sports are in the world and how the athletes are looked upon as different. And you know what? They coexist.
Yep.
You can like rugby and you can like football, or you can like one or the other, or neither. And all of those are appropriate answers. Like, it's okay.
So
You're
with
not
this,
hurting my feelings,
no.
but we live, this, we live in this false outrage. I blame Twitter mostly, but it really it's all social media and really this idea that you're going to be outraged and outrage for outrage's sake. It's like, you don't like rugby, outrage. It's like, well, you don't like rugby, okay.
a lot of a lot of
Okay.
these things, all these exponential technologies are multipliers of what exists. They're inert
Right. That's
till
right.
we apply something to them. And so, my
That's right.
view of a lot of these things is that in organizations and where people are trying to figure out and navigate, am I doing what's right? Is what's right going to be right tomorrow? What do I do next? Have I been good? All of these challenges throughout our career. And then we have, this structure, depending on whether you are, following holocracy or you're,
Mhm.
got traditional militarian kind of structures,
Sure.
is that we all have to exist with this complexity in the human way that we are so different that you've just been describing.
That's right.
And yet we then have to show up in a way that has some kind of, as we now know, what's your why, what's your purpose, all of these things that are so fundamental for often disconnects that end in a relationship that might be, there's such a disconnect from maybe who we were, where we were going, to maybe where I would like to go. So for organizations and teams, and especially dealing with these, very challenging, beautiful, wonderful things called humans, where do you feel, in your experience, things like technology, if you take the Twitter, you throw that into a great environment, wonderful, throw it into a bad one and all you get is bad.
Right.
So
Garbage in, garbage out. Yeah.
So in your world of this sort of intersection of complex people, technology, and mash them together to get good results, what are some of the best examples you've seen of that at the moment that you're quite excited about, that is solving certain problems? Give us some examples of that. It'd be really
Sure.
wonderful to hear.
I think when you look at technology generally in HR and recruiting doesn't solve problems. It's underlining, do you have your people structured in the way that best suits them and suits the organization and the goals of the organization? So are we organized correctly? Do we collaborate in a great way? Are the underpinning processes, have we audited those? Have we made those better? And then you add technology. More often than not, we look at, in HR and TA, we look at technology as a silver bullet to then fix things. And technology doesn't fix things. It actually highlights the weaknesses of where our people are set up and how they're set up and our processes. So if you're looking to fix anything as it relates to people, human talent, anywhere on that spectrum, from sourcing to outplacement, first thing I do is look at your processes and really rethink radical flexibility in a way like, okay, this is the way we've done it. But as Billy Bean has suggested in the past, if we weren't already doing it this way, how would we do it? And it gives everyone the ability to just blank screen it and go, okay, this is how we should do it. Okay, and everybody goes around the room, we collaborate, we get our fingerprints on it, we say yes to it, and then we put a little date on it, a revision date, knowing that we'll come back and revise this and make it better in time. Then you get your people to then collaborate on how with this new process, how they're going to work together. And then you put technology into the mix. If you do it like that, you're going to get a better experience. Everyone's going to get a better experience out of the technology because you'll leverage the best parts of the technology towards your goals, whatever your initiatives are, whatever your goals are. Your processes will have fixed some of the inefficiency. Your team, in a way it collaborates, will have fixed its inefficiency, and the technology has a chance of actually doing what the technology is sold as, but not the magic bullet. But I love technology, but I also caution people of all technology in HR and TA as don't for a moment think that the technology is going to fix any of your problems.
It'll probably create just as many as it's trying to fix along the way, you know, whether that's about the adoption, understanding it, training. I know you've got some real strong views about some of those aspects that when you might have come to the conclusion that you think, this is the one that will influence better decisions. It'll help us highlight things we don't know or accelerate things we want to accelerate or stop doing the things that we want to stop. That's underpinning some of those processes is then, well, how do we figure out how to make this thing work when it looks and speaks or might be slightly different to what's come before? And especially where very rarely does it come into a vacuum. It's coming into something where there's an unlearning needed.
100%.
So there's this relationship people have with not only a belief or a practice, but also current. And now there's
something's being displaced, Ross.
Yeah.
Something's being displaced, and software firms are really, really interesting in the sense of the way we look at competition. Historically, they look at a grid and they look at, okay, that's my competition, this software firm, that software firm, this one. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's true. No, that's true. Your biggest competitor is the status quo. The people doing things the exact same way they did it yesterday. That's your real competitor. How do you get people to then do things differently and emotionally hook them to understand, again, if they rethink their process, and sometimes the rethinking doesn't have to be wholesale change. It can just be a tweak. You know, we're gonna onboard remote employees. Okay, well, how do we onboard employees currently? Okay, well, how do we tweak that, make it personal, and make them feel like they're a part of the team? Great, it's tweak. Doesn't have to be a tear down and build up, but it's something is being displaced. B is not thinking of other software firms as competitors, but thinking of that person's, Betsy's, Michael's, Timmy's mindset is actually what's holding you back.
That's the immune system. Yeah, that's the immune system that says, hey, there's a whack-a-mole, I'm going to smack it.
That's exactly right.
You know, we try to see these things of, oh, well, how does somebody adapt? And we look at their different abilities of things like, you know, for our model, it's mental flexibility, it's grit, it's resilience, it's unlearning. We look at, well, what are some of the characteristics of why? What's their level of hope?
Yep.
You know, what's their motivation style or their thinking style around it? But then one of the interesting things when we were doing our early research, William, was around the environment. When does somebody adapt? You know, what levels of work stress? We need some level of it. Otherwise, we're never going to change. Too much of it, and we might be incapable of changing.
Right.
And so what are the sort of not just systems that are in there? What are the rewards? Do we reward experimentation? You know, we talk about, failure and learning, yet a lot of the structure around everything is on the results, is on performance.
Well, I love NASA's story. I went down to Houston, and it was an experiential learning program that I was a part of. for the conference board, and it was basically, JFK basically said, yeah, we're going to put a man on the moon in 10 years. Okay, yeah. And by the way, we have nothing, zero. We have nothing. NASA wasn't even in existence at the time. And the way that they celebrated failure, which I thought was fascinating, is they had champagne and cakes in the refrigerators, and it was on. And when an engine blew up, it was 7 a.m, an engine blew up, they would all go to the conference center. They'd all get a slice of cake. They'd all get a glass of champagne, and they'd celebrate that this engine just blew up. This engine that they've been working on for the last 2 weeks just blew up. They'd ship champagne, they'd toast, and have a piece of cake, and they'd get back to work. And what they were learning, what they were inspiring, and what I wish other organizations did, is they celebrated failure because they wanted to get there faster. So instead of hiding failure, which is what we tend to do in organizations, and even ourselves, even as people, we tend to hide the failure, whereas we should celebrate the failure, put it forward, go, yeah, I really messed that up.
For years, people talk about it, and talk about how important it is to fail fast, fail cheap, all of these things, and have this mindset. But yet we're not putting in the fundamental celebrations, catch someone doing it right.
That's right.
Oh no, we've got to catch them getting the right result. Well, make the result maybe the failure.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's cultural. I think that's building some of the ceremonies and the traditions and being vulnerable. And again, top down, bottom up, letting people have that space to say, failure isn't bad. It's failing the same way, more, continuously. Yeah, that's actually technically bad. You know what I mean? Like, that's okay, fair enough. But if you fail at something, like you just had a bit, you tried something, it didn't work out, the first thing you should do is talk to your team, talk to your manager, talk to everybody and go, yeah, this didn't work out.
Yeah. Isn't it insanity, William?
It is.
Doing the same thing and in the same way multiple times, expecting a different result.
And
yet we do it.
We do it. We've known that quote for 100 years and we still don't abide by it. Like, at one point, when do we clue in and go, yeah, that actually is the definition of insanity?
Is that what keeps you up at night? Or is there something else that keeps you up at night, William?
I think what keeps me up at night today is the future of work, in the sense of this idea of workplaces and workforce, looking at talent in different ways and looking for talent in different places and allowing them the freedom. So there's in the US, there's 70 million Americans with felonies, and not all felonies are created equal. That means 70 million people have been to jail. So we'll say that. All right. That's 70 million people. That out of that, there are some of those that could possibly do real valuable work for our companies, but we've shut them off. In our application process, do you have a felony? Check this box. If you do, can't work here. And so it's rethinking the way that we look at talent, all forms of talent, part-time, full-time, flex, any way that you want to kind of define, how do you bring skills to bear, and when and where do you do that just in time? So I'm really giving a lot of thought to how do we kind of unlearn a lot of the things that we've done since World War II, and the way that we've structurally kind of created culture, quote unquote culture, and really, I think this is a great phase. I hate the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, any of the things that start with great that has like where a couple of million people died, I think is like, not the irony is not lost to me. It's like, let's call it the Great Holocaust. Like, really? Seriously? No, we would never do that because that would be offensive. We shouldn't call it great because it's not great. However, I do believe the next decade is where we unlearn a bunch of things.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that, actually. I'm terrified, and excited simultaneously.
And I guess keeping awake at night can be through excitement, and it can be through terror. That's another lovely, beautiful paradox, right?
That's right.
And this, systems that we've had, which was about how do we manage? So we had management, we had structure, and how do we mitigate risk? Felony, to check a box, is to mitigate a potential risk.
That's right.
Whereas now, I think the awakening, the opportunity is to how do we take risks? How do we then shift to coaching? How do we shift to not linking identity and role, i.e. this career path, you've had this, therefore you can move in these couple of ways. And that's how we try and map out a mobility or a pathway for somebody, to actually see them as something that hasn't been yet created. The same way we see someone who's 5 years old.
That's right.
Why can't we see people the same way as someone who's 5 years old when they're 55 years old, when they're 65, when they're 75, to say anything's still possible? Is the world still your oyster at 75? Absolutely it is, if we look at it in that way, with that mindset.
I think the thing that we're both excited about is that it's becoming more about skills. And skills can be transferred, skills can be made better. You can learn new things. So it's a kind of some of it's your passions and your abilities. And it's less about like what you did in the past. And the irony of that is, in every financial ad that you would ever see, there's always this bit that says past performance doesn't necessarily indicate future performance. Like, we've listened to these ads for 40 years, and they all say the same thing at the end. Past performance is not a predictor of future performance. Okay, so why do we look at people's LinkedIn profiles or look at their resumes in a way of looking at what they did in the past, other than to audit what their passions and skills are? Like, what do you want? What are you passionate about learning? What skills do you already have? How do you want to grow those skills, or tangential skills, or transferable skills, and make that the story of how we grow skills with people? And again, I think it's a two-way street. People have to want to grow those skills, and companies should want to grow those skills as well.
I think it's also even just getting into that place from where you might have got where you are because you had a knowing. You learned skills, you learn experience, and therefore the level of success has been an applause and thank you for the skills you've acquired. If we now almost say, we want you to rewind, to be vulnerable, to go and play with some new skills that you may or may not like, and they may or may not be valuable, and they may or may not in 2 years be relevant.
That's right.
That's for one person so exciting, who their fire lights when you say, I'm learning, I'm growing. If it's novel and new, I'm great. For many people, that's a place they run away from, not run towards.
They're terrified. 100%.
Terrified by those things.
Terrified.
And the world at the moment, just like for many years, it has been bent and biased to reward extroverts in the broad terms.
Right.
We're now entering a world that will potentially reward the learners, that will reward the people that are more adaptable, that are able to transition from one state of knowing to a state of not knowing, to a state of discovery and experimentation. Now, for us, our mission is, how do we leave no one behind? All relevant to their own context, so that tomorrow can be better than yesterday in your world. Now, that's a broad piece, but
but some of that is you don't define. You don't need to define what success is for them. They do.
Yes.
It's allowing the freedom of saying, listen, you're going to fail, but you're going to adapt. It's just a question of how you consume those things. And I love the way that people talk about ambiguity. And I tend to talk about ambiguity. It's like, some people just have a different way of consuming it. They can consume ambiguity in ways that that other folks, mere mortals, can't consume ambiguity. It's true as of ambiguity and adaptability and failure. We've got to basically, instead of setting one gold standard and saying, okay, everyone needs to be this level of adaptable or adaptability. Basically, let's meet them where they are and teach them adaptability. If they don't, if structurally they don't understand it, or maybe they didn't grow up with it, then teaching them so that they start their adaptability journey and meeting them where they are and letting them discover where they're more adaptable and maybe where they're not as pliable.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
that's fine.
It's contextually relevant. And I think some of the challenges is we have some biological, just like we have organizational structures that were fit for purpose in a playbook when the world was, let's say, a desert, and we set our system up that way. Now, if it's a different environment we're playing, we need a different playbook. Well, our biology and bodies have actually rewarded repeat. You know, we get dopamine hit through mastery of doing the same thing.
That's right.
And all of those
Muscle
neurons wire together. And therefore, to unlearn them is blooming hard.
Oh, yeah.
So when we then go through that period, our grit increases over time, but equally the opportunity to unlearn increases. And some of the things that where you were talking there about how do we respond differently to ambiguity? For some, that triggers an amygdala hijack and a stress response.
That's
but then we can't make a blooming decision because we've we've just made ourselves dumb.
That's
and it's not necessarily our fault. But if
Nope.
we can reach a place through practice of, biology works in that way, I can send different signals, I can breathe, I can do this, and I'll open up new opportunities to see.
So see, one of the things that what I love that you're doing is you're saying just knowing yourself, understanding what's going on. So let's say that you can't consume ambiguity like your best friend. Fantastic. Okay, well, there's a workaround. First of all, you got to know. You got to know yourself. You got to know the systems that are at play, your brain and how it's working, so that you can say, okay, all right, I don't handle ambiguity as well. Like, and this is true. I mean, I had a business partnership years ago where we literally were at odds at different points, and what we learned is just our personalities. Is I make decisions in seconds. Somebody presents a case, and I'm like, yeah, gotta go this way. And my business partner, whom was literally probably one of the smartest people I've ever been around, he wasn't built that way. He needed to reflect. He wanted to do research. He wanted to think about it. He wanted to kind of ponder it, kind of talk to a couple people, and then 48 hours later, then he'd be ready to make a decision. Oftentimes, we came to the same conclusion. Oftentimes, we just got there differently.
Yeah.
And once we learned that about each other, it gave us both the freedom. Like when something happened, I'd go, yeah, we got to go this way. And then I'd turn to him and say, I know you need some time, do your deal, and then let's talk about it in 2 days. And then he wasn't stressed because I wasn't going, hey, where we at? Where we at? Come on, make a decision. No. Be like me. Make a decision like I make decisions. Like, that's just dumb. Make decisions in the way that you need to consume that, work your process, do those things as you need to do. And also, it gave us the freedom of respecting each other's process.
And it's the unknowing of that often creates the friction. 100%. So in
100%.
organizations right now, is if they have things that are unknowing, they might be, it's happening in our subconscious. There might be that we just don't see it yet. I can't see the little trails that the rats and mice leave because they're incontinent along the floor, but birds can see that. If I get a black light, I can come and see it. Right. So just because I can't see it, I might think it doesn't exist.
That's right.
For many of us, we have all of these things, depending on what we have read, what we've learned, that we might not really know what's just gone on and happened when I'm in reaction mode and I've gotten up on stage and I've slapped somebody. Whereas the ability to go, was that his biology that was happening because of a series of events that's happened over the last 6 years or 56 years that's led him to the point in which that reaction overtook what a lot of his rational thought would be, because it became very emotional. Now, we're all susceptible to those moments, especially 100%. When we are at a high point or a low point.
And people are going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. Like, it's okay, just as we talked about vulnerability and failure and things like that, you're going to make mistakes. And, after that, I saw it live. and saw it unedited. And so what was really interesting about that experience is I went through all the range of emotions. I went through kind of looking at it from Jada's perspective, looking at it from Will's perspective, looking from Chris's perspective, the audience, etc. And it's like, on one level, I look at that and say, that's something I could easily have seen myself doing. I'm making that mistake, because I do consider it a mistake. I think that, there's a couple things that scared me about that event, because as a consumer of comedy, I think historically comics are truth tellers, and so them telling jokes, even if you don't like the joke, they get you to think. If done well, they get you to think. And if you don't like a joke, which is part of comedy, you're not supposed to like every joke. In fact, if you like every joke, they didn't do their job. Like I watched the guy last night that was talking about watching ISIS videos. He's a Jewish guy. And as a hobby, he watches ISIS videos, and he wants to be a brand consultant to ISIS and get them to redo some things so that they can get better. And it was a funny bit, and he was mocking the whole thing, of course. But it got us to think, like, why do they have words on their ISIS flags when they're trying to recruit illiterate people? Like, you know what? That's a funny bit. Or for some people, that's not a funny bit.
Yeah.
But and so when I looked at that exchange, I thought to myself, what I'm fearful of is that comics are going to not tell their version of the truth. And again, you're worried about am I going to offend somebody? Well, your job's to offend somebody. Like, if somebody goes to a comedy act and isn't offended, again, what did you do? Why were you on stage? Your job is to tell some versions of the truth, make people think, make people deal with the hypocrisy and the complexities of life. So on one level, I understand Will's reaction, because it's something that's visceral, it's human to errors, to be human. Like, it is something that I could absolutely see myself making the exact same mistake. And at the same time, simultaneous to that, I can also see I'm worried about how this impacts comedy. I'm worried about how this impacts the people in comedy telling their version of the truth and not worrying about offending people.
And the same piece of that storyline, just taken in terms of a work context of where we're trying to build these psychologically safe places, where we're trying to say, we want feedback, we want all feedback, but actually be prepared that some feedback might result in a slap. And how do we put in place a system that can deal with that, that can cope with that can maybe at times mitigate, but equally then, if the slap happens, do we then shut it all down? i.e. fear of comedy.
The slap's going to happen.
They are in their own way, whatever the version that is. Slamming a door, going out, turning off of Zoom, whatever it may be.
If we do diversity correctly in the workplace, you've got conflict. You've created. You've made the decision.
You've got friction. Yeah.
You've got friction.
Yeah.
And in that friction, you're not going to all see the world the same way. And that's the beauty. That's actually the upside. Downside is, okay, how do you then deal with, we didn't go to the same college, we don't belong to the same country club, we don't all have the same types of wives, we don't see the world the exact same way, and thus we need to now resolve that friction. And so you're not going to mitigate the slap. You're not going to mitigate the door slamming. You're not going to mitigate hard conversations. But what you can do is set up that space of saying, hey, when we disagree, not if.
This is the process. This is how we do it. And
this is how we bring things together.
As a final bit, because I know we can spend I'm sure a long time talking, is this thing of friction, because it's a bit like sleep, actually, William, because in my younger years, I thought, sleep just gets in the way. I'll do as little as possible, because all my good stuff is the work. And I've completely flipped to go, no, sleep is the good stuff, right? So friction, I had this, I need to remove it everywhere. Friction is this bad egg.
I want friction.
To then thinking, well, without friction on a racetrack, a car wouldn't turn a bend.
That's
Without
right.
friction, a plane wouldn't fly. So
That's right.
actually, we just need to leverage friction in the right place and at the right time.
100%.
So I don't want friction from a car when I'm looking at the aerodynamics down a straight, but I do want it on my tires when I go around a corner. So in a business, in that diversity and leadership is where and what friction can be leveraged in what way? How do we see it as inert, same as technology? And we just then need to apply it in ways that allow paradoxes, allow experimentation, but we need to, I think, still as humans, recognize the difference between the space that this may create a amygdala hijack moment. And about how do we deal with that? It also might create moments at which we just need to make sure there's no malice. I intentionally want to offend you. That's the place for comedy. This is
That's right.
I'm doing it because I care.
Yep.
I care about you. I care about you enough that I'm going to tell you something that you might not like. That's what
you'll love this because you mentioned I interact with a lot of startups. I interact with a lot of senior leaders as well. And one thing always comes up. And it's the phrase, William, really want to get your opinion on this. I go, every single time, the same bit. I go, time out. Do you really?
Are you ready?
Do you really? And then oh yeah, we really want you. We really want your opinion, and we want your take. We want your advice. We want this. I'm like, how do you take feedback? How do you consume feedback? Because I'm about to tell you your baby is not just ugly, but stupid. So how do you consume that? Before we go down this path, because this could impact our friendship. Because I'm about to tell you some things that you're not going to, not just not going to want to hear, that you're not going to be able to unhear. So are you sure you want my feedback? Are you sure you want my opinion? Because if you're not, that's cool too. Like I can live with my own opinion in my head and let it a little bounce around in my brain for a while. Like I don't have to get it out. I don't have to express it. It doesn't have to be expressed. If you've asked me to express an opinion, I'll do so.
Yeah.
But I'll ask you first, before we run right into that, I'll say, same thing I say to every CEO and every person I deal with. Are you sure?
That's a beautiful
Are you really sure?
Of laying down the permission.
That's right.
To give feedback.
That's right.
And rather than just hitting it, maybe that's the piece that we can all, take from just that last riff of thought.
Yeah.
Is if we should be aware if what we're about to give might not be what they want to hear, but what they need to hear.
Generally
for that
isn't.
Permission. Generally is when it's
generally
the good stuff.
Isn't.
When it's the good stuff, right?
If it's a compliment, okay, it's a compliment. It's going to be relatively easy. Like, oh, this software is gorgeous. Like this, that's an easy. And if it's true, that's easy.
Works well, bad UI or whatever it may be.
Right.
Is that now, we need feedback quickly, and we need it honestly, and we need it with that radical candor.
Well, what's interesting is feedback comes in. You can do a Boston Consulting Group 2x2 with feedback. And you can basically say positive feedback comes in 4 ways. It's either positive or negative inherently. There's no neutral feedback. And it's either solicited or unsolicited. And personally, as a human being and as a speaker, I love solicited negative feedback. So let that settle in for just a second. I unsolicited feedback, like somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, William, you're great." like I did the bit. I know what worked and what didn't. Like I appreciate that kind of, but I don't need it. I don't require it. What I require is negative feedback, things that I couldn't see about myself, like things that I did or things I said or something that resonated or didn't resonate. I need that. I need that negative feedback, like, William, you probably could have not done that bit, or you probably stayed too long talking about this thing. Okay, cool. I want to learn that. But I only want to learn it from people I solicit the feedback from. and not from randos, not from people that just like feel like they need to give me feedback. Like I just full stop them. Like, yeah, this is unsolicited feedback. I don't really do well with unsolicited feedback. So you might feel like you need to give me that feedback. That's fine. I'll create the space and you can give me that feedback. It just won't go anywhere because I refuse to actually take unsolicited feedback.
Is that a protection mechanism from the world of Twitter, from so much volume, so much thought, or is that just the way you've always been? What's been the reason?
Unsolicited feedback. Well, so positive feedback, I don't, and I teach my boys this the same thing, same way. I don't believe you should, as a human being, seek validation from anyone other than yourself. So your parents, other friends, coworkers, whatever, like you should be in competition with your best version of yourself. So seeking validation from someone else is an exercise in futility. So from a very young age, I've never sought validation from people. So the solicited versus unsolicited, when people unsolicited give me advice or give me whatever feedback it is, it's generally they feel like they have to say something, which again, I'll create the space. I'm not an asshole. I'll create the space and let them do their bit. I just won't take it. I won't listen to it. It goes nowhere. I think when it comes down to positive and negative, I learn more from the negative because I'm my own worst critic. Like I've thought about things, I've rethought things, I probably overanalyzed things. So I've already been through everything that someone else is going to go through. And I've done that critique of myself on anything, whether or not it's an article or painting or a speech or whatever. I've done that bit. What I don't know is what I don't know.
Yeah.
And so when somebody can give me something and go, hey, you probably didn't know this, but like you said 22 times in your speech. I didn't know that. I wasn't aware. I wasn't triggered. I didn't see that. And so that is powerful for me.
Yeah. Is
someone giving me that, what we used to call the CEO's dilemma of I don't know what I don't know, which is basically everyone's dilemma. But it's, I don't know those things. So I seek those out from people that I trust, that then they'll tell me the truth. And so that's that my mechanism of going to people that I trust and go, I trust you. And I know you're going to tell me the truth. So tell me the truth and tell me things that I did that I could have gotten better at. Yeah. And that's, I don't think it's a mechanism to hide things or to protect myself against
it's
stuff.
A mechanism for growth, which is what fuels you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I want to be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I want to finish off with a last question, if I may, William.
Sure.
And it's, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And what was it?
Oh, good gosh. Last Thursday. I did 3 conferences in one day, all live. One for at 3 a.m, my time for Dubai, and one at 3 o'clock with it was my own training conference. We had about 6,000 people there. And so I was moderating moderators. So it was kind of a fun bit. And then at 8 o'clock that night, I did a conference live for a Singaporean audience. And all 3 of which I didn't prepare for. I did no preparation whatsoever. I just put the camera in front of myself and said, okay, here's the bit. And it was 3 completely different topics.
Or did you do 53 years of preparation?
Point taken. Yes, that is true. That is true. Yes. Yeah. And but it was interesting to do though for different audiences, not preparing and having fantastic conversations with people and allowing myself the freedom of not being over prepared, caring enough to think like about it, but wanting to be live. Like in both Singapore and Dubai, they wanted me to record it. They wanted me to record the session and then just give them the session. And I told both of them, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And they're like, yeah, but the times are going to be, I don't care.
Yeah. You want the energy, you want the dynamic nature of what will
That's right.
unfold. The path
That's
will
right.
reveal itself as I
That's exactly right.
begin my first word.
Yeah.
All right, William.
That was the juice for me, is actually being in front of the audience and them asking questions live and saying, hey, William, you said this, what about that? Oh, Mohammed has a wonderful question. Here's what I think about that. Like, that's the juice.
Yeah.
And so, but 3 events in 1 day, no preparation, other than 53 years of preparation. No other preparation was something new.
And that's your flow, by the sounds of it. That ability to respond to stimulus. Yes. And to quickly compute, calculate, and then come up with a idea, a thought, a concept, something that triggers a piece of art to an experience to a story.
That's
right. I love that, William. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Perhaps some of the regular listeners, a different conversation, as they always are on each of our episodes, but a hugely valuable one where I've learned, where I'm going to reflect on. And I'm extremely grateful for our connection. And I look forward to learning more, collaborating more, and co-elevating together.
And we both have yellow glasses. So seriously, we didn't plan this, folks. We didn't call each other the night before and said, hey, wear your yellow glasses tomorrow. This just happened. And William has worn them since high school. So that's right. That is amazing piece. Yellow glasses since high school. I'm just 2018, so I am a mere newbie in the yellow glasses. It's okay.
World.
We take you in. You're now a part of the tribe. It's a part of the tribe. Thank you so much again, Ross. Thank you so much for having me, and for the audience. Thank you for listening. And if you need anything, just reach out.
Fantastic. We'll put a load of links, loads of pieces in there to reach out to William and Recruiting Daily and all the pieces of content that you share out in the world. It's been a real pleasure. And take care.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.